Change in tone. The president's meeting with the wife of an imprisoned pastor signals new direction. Who's in charge? It depends on who you ask in Yemen, where political turmoil threatens stability. Moving on. The march may be over, but Students for Life keep the pro-life movement going. And can we talk? Pope Francis urges families to stop texting and start talking. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Friday, January 23rd, 2015. Good evening from Washington. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. The family of an American pastor jailed for his faith in Iran is encouraged by the president's renewed attention to his case. Jason Calvi reports.
Brian, Saeed Abedini was setting up an orphanage in his native Iran back in 2012. It was then that he was arrested. Now it's his kids who are without a dad. His offense? The country said he was a threat to national security because of his work as a Christian missionary. 8-year-old Rebecca and 6-year-old Jacob Abedini haven't seen their father for 850 days. But this week, Jacob asked another father of two for help.
I could see President Obama, his father's side, coming out and saying, you know what, Jacob, I will try.
More than 2 years after Abedini's arrest, the president met Naghmeh on his visit to Boise, Idaho this week.
Praying and fasting and hoping that God would make this happen.
Naghmeh says they connected.
A lot of the words he used, I felt that he was involved, his heart was involved.
The president told Naghmeh it's about religious freedom, an issue his critics accuse him of being soft on. Robert George of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom says the president's involvement is key.
It's important for presidents to send the signal to regimes that offend against human rights that the United States is paying attention and means to stand up for its values.
Welcome home, Alan.
The U.S. has negotiated deals and freed prisoners before. The president mentioned Alan Gross, the American recently released from a Cuban prison, who he honored just this week at the State of the Union. The president told Naghmeh Saeed's release was also a top priority. This wife prays her husband will be next. And Naghmeh tells us there's been a lot of movement since the presidential meeting. The White House and State Department have both followed up with her. The goal is to reunite a husband with his wife and kids. Brian?
Jason Calvi, thank you. And now some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. Thousands of protesters demonstrate across Yemen today. Some support the Shiite rebels who seized their capital. Others demand the country's south secede after the nation's president and cabinet resigned. To many people in Yemen, it's not clear who is in charge. You ask these men at the markets, and some say the former president has the power. Some say nobody does. Others point at themselves, saying the people are now the president. These Houthi gunmen outside the presidential palace say they were offering protection to President Abdu Rabu Mansour Hadi after they took control and members of the Republican Guard left their posts. Hadi's government is a key U.S. ally in the fight against terrorism. In terms of U.S. strategy, the divisions in Yemen are unsettling.
We're not just monitoring it, we're discussing internally the situation and what the right steps are. But nothing has changed at this point in time in terms of our presence there.
Since 2006, the U.S. has provided more than $400 million to help Yemen train commandos and improve Air Force surveillance and Coast Guard patrols. It's not clear if the U.S. can or will work with the Houthi rebels, who have been able to negotiate a tentative power-sharing agreement.
But that adds just to the disarray of the country. I mean, Yemen has a weakened economy and political upheaval. AQAP is very active.
And AQAP, the deadliest surviving offshoot of al-Qaeda, isn't the only jihadist group operating in Yemen anymore. ISIS has now established a foothold there. Also in the Middle East, his conservative kingdom, he was seen as a reformer. Saudi Arabia's King Abdullah has died. He was 90 and ascended to the throne almost 10 years ago. King Abdullah was admitted to a hospital several weeks ago, suffering from pneumonia. His funeral was held today at a mosque in Riyadh. President Obama said in a statement, the closeness and strength of the partnership between our two countries is part of King Abdullah's legacy. The new king is calling on Saudis to come together.
Dear brothers, today our Islamic nation is in desperate need of unity and solidarity, and we will continue with our march in this country.
Salman has increasingly taken on the duties of king over the past year as his half-brother Abdullah grew ill. Pope Francis asks members of the Vatican's highest appellate court for pastoral conversion when deciding marriage annulments. The Holy Father received the judges of the Roman Rota today to inaugurate the legal year. That court decides whether or not to grant an annulment, a declaration that there was never a sacramental marriage. Pope Francis reminded the judges that the highest law is the salvation of souls. He says the legal structures of the church are in the service of the faithful. And the Pope is urging families to put aside their iPhones and Twitter feeds and learn to talk with one another again. His annual message for the Church's World Day of Communications was released today. The Holy Father says the media can both help or hinder family communication. The great challenge facing us today, he says, is to learn once again how to talk to one another, not simply how to generate and consume information. Francis says families are the model for all communications, since it is in the family where children first learn to forgive. An American priest is one step closer to sainthood. Pope Francis says Monsignor Aloysius Schwartz, known as Father Al, who was born in the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C., lived a life of heroic virtue. The now venerable priest founded 2 religious orders and served poor children in Korea and the Philippines. He is one miracle away from being named a blessed. A second miracle would confirm his statehood. As we continue our Precious Gifts special coverage of the March for Life, Dr. Grazie Pozo Christie is a member of the Catholic Association, the Mother of Five. She spoke at the rally before the march with its theme, Every Life is a Gift. There was a focus on prenatal diagnosis. Now, you're a radiologist. Can you tell us more about those tests?
Well, I'm a radiologist, and I get to be there for that amazing moment when a mom and dad see their baby for the very first time. And that's fabulous. And it has shown everybody the humanity of the fetus in a way that everyone can see. You don't have to be a scientist or a doctor to know that that's a living person, a growing person inside the mother. But ultrasound has a dark side, because ultrasound has allowed us to find certain defects with children, in young children and babies in the womb, and some people are choosing to abort them.
Isn't it sad that God gives us the intelligence and the means to develop such a wonderful tool, and it's being used to decide to kill babies?
It is sad, but I was very heartened yesterday at the march, because it's so young and so fervent, and I think that science is showing the young generation the truth that can't be hidden anymore, that what's going on inside a pregnant woman is a miracle, and what is growing is a child.
You come from a Cuban background. You were also raised in Mexico. You wrote how the pro-life movement should especially be supported by the Hispanic community.
You know, like most Hispanic people here in the United States, we come from, we've been buffeted by world events, and we come to the United States and we know that the people we can depend on are our families, and we learn to accept everyone in our family and to value them, and that's it's a Hispanic value to love everyone in the family, no matter what utility or worth that they bring.
And we can all learn from that. So a bill to ban abortions after 20 weeks was pulled from the House floor. Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi recalled a time that she opposed similar legislation. Listen to this.
As a Catholic and mom of 5, opposing some of the initiatives similar to what, in the same vein of what we have today, one of the Republican members got up and said, Nancy Pelosi thinks she knows more about having babies than the Pope.
What do you make of that?
That's sort of sad.
Yeah, and disrespectful.
It is very disrespectful. I mean, as a mom myself and a Catholic, a mom of 5, the only thing you need to know is that a mom's first duty is to protect her child, and we have to feel like that about the children inside us too. I'm sorry that she hasn't learned it.
Well, we really appreciate your perspective as a mom of 5, as a radiologist, and as a pro-life activist. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Enjoyed seeing you. Well, the culture of life can't be built in a day. It's an ongoing process. Mark Irons spent part of today with an enthusiastic student group taking the March for Life to the next level.
Georgia,
North Dakota,
Ohio, Virginia.
Students from all over speaking out against abortion today at the annual Students for Life conference.
Abortion is targeted towards our group, so I think we want to stand up and say that we're not actually for it and that we're not easily taken down.
According to Students for Life, young people made up 3/4 of the crowd at this year's March for Life in Washington, D.C.
This generation is, I think, the movement to a new beginning. So I think it's really exciting.
That's great that you have this great feeling, but now what do you do with it?
Kristen Hawkins, the president of Students for Life of America, is helping these students take their message to the streets.
We're training them today how to talk compassionately and effectively about abortion. You know, how to engage people, how to organize, how do we mobilize on campuses and our communities so that we actually do abolish abortion in this lifetime.
People from different backgrounds fighting for a culture of life.
It's not all just older people trying to stop it, it's everyone.
We're the next generation that's going to be coming up. We need to start making changes now.
Right behind me, over 2,000 students are meeting, listening to great guest speakers, watching inspiring videos, really trying to build up that pro-life culture.
We're truly making a difference in the fight to end of abortion.
And that brings this group out of their seats and up on their feet. Mark Irons, EWTN News Nightly.
Coming up, a scathing scandal may have caught up with a powerful New York politician. And with more pro-life voices in both the House and Senate, this activist is optimistic about the new Congress. Thank you for joining us on this Friday evening, January 23rd. I'm Brian Patrick. Senator Marco Rubio appears to be taking another step toward a possible 2016 presidential run. The Florida Republican has hired a new finance director who will initially work for his political action committee. Rubio takes a fundraising trip through California next week. He plans to meet with advisors and supporters this weekend. They'll likely discuss his future political plans and possible strategy. One of the New York's most powerful politicians has been arrested on corruption charges. Catherine Zeltner reports.
Authorities say New York Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver used his position to make millions in bribes and kickbacks and masked the money as legitimate income.
Over his decades in office, Speaker Silver has amassed titanic political power. But as alleged, during that same time, Silver also amassed a tremendous personal fortune through the abuse of that political power.
Silver's attorney called the charges meritless. The 70-year-old lawmaker appeared in federal court and was later released on bond.
I am confident that when all the issues are aired, I will be vindicated.
Silver's outside income has long been a source of discussion and controversy. In 2013, he publicly accused an anti-corruption commission investigating him and other state legislators of going on a fishing expedition. The Moorland Commission, as it was known, was later disbanded after changes were made to existing bribery laws.
He's covered up instance after instance here inside, he's been a cover-up artist really for a long time, and I think enough's enough.
Analysts say his arrest will have wide-reaching implications for New York's state assembly.
It's going to set off a scramble for leadership in the Assembly, and it creates real questions which seem fairly well settled as recently as yesterday during the governor's State of the State address about the prospects for his policy proposals going forward.
Just one day after sharing the stage with Governor Cuomo, a new ending is being written for one of the most storied figures in New York politics. Catherine Zeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Catherine. And the makeup of Congress is decidedly more pro-life than it's been for some time. That is cause for optimism for Concerned Women of America's Penny Nance, who talked with our Susanne LaFrankie.
Penny, where do we see the pro-life movement here in Washington on Capitol Hill moving forward? Where do we see it going?
Well, we're certainly seeing more pro-life members elected. After the last election, we saw a groundswell of support for new members in both the House and the Senate. So we have got the most pro-life Congress in body together right now that we've had in many, many years. We're very excited about working with them. But you know that politics is downstream of public opinion. And the good news about that is that the American people are with us. They may not be like me and think that life begins at conception, but they certainly aren't in line with Roe v. Wade. The vast majority of people support prohibitions and support certain like clinic regulations, support the 5-month ban, support parental notification laws, men and women. And so we are really seeing a groundswell of support, people at the voting booth, people calling their congressmen, people coming out and even talking to their neighbors like they've never done before.
And what about the fact that sort of that feminism movement is kind of gone? Now we're seeing women being elected like Joni Ernst, who are pro-life. Can you comment on that?
Right. You know, we, Concerned Women for America is the nation's largest women's organization. We have about 500,000 members, 400 chapters, and we are pro-life women, and it's always been that way. However, we've got a lot more support now, and there's many more of us growing. Millennials are the most pro-life generation that we've seen since Roe v. Wade. We have 26 college chapters around this country full of young women for America who are pro-life. So we are so excited to see the fact that we are growing as a nation and as a pro-life movement.
What about in Congress, the women that are coming in now that are pro-life?
Right.
Are you seeing change there?
Absolutely. Well, you know, you mentioned earlier Joni Ernst. Joni Ernst is a senator from Iowa who ran very clearly on the fact that she was pro-life. She will be standing with Lindsey Graham and others of us at a press conference in a few days to introduce the fetal pain bill, the 20-week or 5-month ban in the Senate. You know, we've got Deb Fisher over there, Kelly Ayotte. That wasn't the case, you know, a few years ago. So we're so grateful that their numbers and the ranks are growing in the Senate, and certainly we have more pro-life women in the House. So this is good news for us.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. God bless.
God bless.
Up next, from the Vatican to our local parishes, Christian unity is the prayer focus this week. And we return to the Philippines, where lives and hearts have been changed by a visit from Pope Francis. Tomorrow, the Church celebrates the Feast of St. Francis de Sales, a doctor of the Church, the French saint, a patron of Christian unity, helping to bring thousands of Protestants back to the Catholic Church. Thanks for joining us on this Thursday evening, January 23rd. I'm Brian Patrick, and the annual Week of Prayer for Christian Unity ends this Sunday. Many Christian communities, including Catholics, have been holding prayer services with members of other denominations. The Pope hosted a delegation of Lutherans from Finland this week. He talked about times of mistrust, insecurity, and suffering. He told the group, quote, "A shared Christian witness is very much needed." Cardinal Kurt Koch, who heads the Vatican's Council for Promoting Christian Unity, agrees.
We have need the blessing one another in the ecumenical dialogue, and I think this is a very beautiful sign for deepen the friendship and the brotherhood.
Here in the U.S., resources for the Week of Prayer are being put out by the Franciscan Friars of the Atonement. There's a unique theme each year and scripture readings for each day. You can learn more at geii.org. Father John Crossin is consultor for the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity. He directs the U.S. Catholic Bishop's Office for Ecumenical Dialogue. On what levels can we build bridges with other faith communities?
Well, there tends to be a progression, Brian, in building the bridges. First of all, you get to know people as friends, share maybe about your families or where you grew up. Then it progresses a bit to church practices. What does your church do? What do we do? Maybe you get into a little theology. But finally, people get to the point where they'll share their spiritual journey, their vocation, what God has called them to do. That would be the deepest level. And it tends to go step by step, maybe even over a period of years.
I've done it. I'm sure many of you have as well. But that is grassroots. How is it being done on the diocesan level?
Well, each diocese has an ecumenical officer. They have a national association, and that person is responsible, usually with a diocesan ecumenism committee, for putting on events, for building bridges with the churches, Christian churches in their area, and seeing what the common needs are. Often they do social work together, feeding the homeless and that kind of thing.
And certainly the pro-life movement is a way that brings different denominations together.
Oh, absolutely. I've met many evangelicals, for example, down at the march.
So I wanted to look at a significant moment for ecumenism last year. Pope Francis asked the Patriarch of Constantinople for his blessing.
Di benedire me e la Chiesa di Roma.
The Pope saying, bless me and the Church of Rome. Unpack that moment as it relates to ecumenism.
Well, we've gotten great feedback on it because it's a symbolic moment. It speaks of humility, and not just Francis' humility, but of the church, that we are brothers and sisters, and that is the message conveyed, and it's very important to our Orthodox friends. They think very highly of this Pope, and they think even more highly of his symbolic gestures.
It reminds me when he asked all of us to pray for him when he walked out on the loggia when he was elected, and he bowed for our prayers. So these two spiritual leaders have been together before at the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. What other ecumenical highlights do you want to mention from 2014?
Well, one is the role of Christian churches together, the biggest tent in the ecumenical movement. The Catholic bishops belong to it. This year we discussed mass incarceration, reconciliation, healing, came out with a very good statement on that, which is found on the Christian Churches Together website. And that will be significant for the long term in reclaiming people and their lives.
It seems like we're moving in a direction of unity, doesn't it?
We certainly are.
Father John Crossin, thank you for your input tonight.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. Well, history was made this week as Pope Francis visited the Philippines. Cardinal Luis Tagle, Manila's Archbishop, says there's much to reflect on, pray about, and learn from the papal visit. Our Susie Pinto was there with the Holy Father. Tonight, she looks back at a trip that moved many hearts.
Massive crowds turned out to see the man they call Santo Papa. Many Filipinos hoping to catch even just a glimpse of the Holy Father, grateful for a blessing. He came to this small island nation to be with the poor and those who are suffering. But on this trip, Pope Francis posed tough questions for the rich and powerful.
Yo aprendí a llorar cuando veo un niño con hambre, un niño drogado en la calle, un niño que no tiene casa, un niño abandonado, un niño abusado, un niño usado por una sociedad como esclavo.
Have I learned how to weep for somebody who's left to one side? Have I learned to weep for someone who has a drug problem? Have I learned how to weep for someone who has suffered abuse?
And he showed Filipinos that compassion, traveling to the region hit hard by a typhoon in 2013.
Tantos de ustedes han perdido todo.
So many of you have lost everything.
Yo no sé qué decirles.
I don't know what to say to you.
Él sí sabe qué decirles.
But the Lord does know what to say to you.
The message is stirring consciences in a country plagued by corruption and poverty.
Many of us are in tears and very emotional about it. Primarily touches a chord on what being a Catholic is all about, and that is caring for the poor, the marginalized, the lost, and the children.
I think he's really down to earth to people here in the Philippines. He can really, he really listens to the people and he shows us his love.
Pope Francis is having an authentic Filipino experience. He came amid a typhoon, and he also came on one of the biggest Catholic feast days here, the Feast of the Infant Jesus, the Santo Niño. What we've seen here in the Philippines is that Catholics are serious about their faith, and they're serious about celebrating that faith.
We're excited, really excited, and we're grateful that the Pope is here for the Filipino people.
We're very happy he's here, and I hope he'll come back again.
In the meantime, many Filipinos hope their government and the local church will take the Pope's words to heart. But for now, this nation rejoices for a visit that has left a deep impression on its people. In Manila, Susie Pinto, EWTN News Nightly.
Mabuhay si Papa Francisco!
What a beautiful reminder of history being made. Millions attending a papal mass in Manila. Hundreds of thousands march for life here in D.C. What a week it's been. We end tonight with a few memories from this year's march. For the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. Good night and God bless you.